Hi everyone, this is Eric. Just touching base again to give everyone a little bit of an update on what I've discovered based on, from the Mercer County tax reassessment issues, the clean and green, and that kind of thing. Now, the last post that I made in that regard was after I had attended the county, one of the county meetings for the tax reassessment. I did wind up attending the Clean and Green meeting in Jackson Center. Apparently, when they had the meetings also in Greenville and in Mercer, there were an overflow capacity. Everybody couldn't get in that wanted to, that kind of thing. And at Jackson Center as well. There were so many people that showed up that the meeting room where they were going to have the meeting was completely inadequate. There were many people standing outside, not able to get in. So thanks to the Jackson Center volunteer firemen. They emptied out their parking garage of all the fire engines and all the equipment, and we were able to use the parking and maintenance garage for the meeting, which wound up being completely packed, standing room only, very, very, very full room. And so there's a lot of people very interested about what's happening, what's going on. So I thought I'd give you an update on what I know, what I've discovered since then. I wanted to wait a little while, get some more information and that kind of thing before making another post, because everything that I had to say in my first post wasn't completely accurate. I did make a follow-up to make a couple corrections, and so I wanted to make sure this time that I would get it right the first time. And so, here I'll express to you what I know concerning the reassessment and what I know concerning the clean and green, and then some other concerns about it. So concerning reassessment, the state is requiring now that everybody reassess, come up to current up to date on current tax values, or real market values for the purposes of taxation. Okay, so now also, so what's important to know is that we're not just being reassessed this one time. For example, we have not been reassessed in Mercer County since like 1970, and so we're going on 1970 evaluations, and just our millage rate has just adjusted to compensate and to facilitate the county budget and the school budget and everything else. So now what's happening is we're all going to be reevaluated. What they have said is the hardest hit are going to be the people like the Lake Latonka community, some of the more upscale communities, and that kind of thing, who where the values there have not been adjusted for a long time. There are many huge improvements. Values have skyrocketed since then, so they're going to be fairly unhappy with their new assessed values. The others that are going to be hit hardest are going to be landowners, specifically farmers and those who own fair-sized tracts of land. Not hundreds of acres, but 15, 20, 30 acres and more, I would be my guess, are going to be fairly hard hit with new taxation. And so, in contrast, there may even be some who find that the taxes actually drop, they go down, they diminish. But regardless, what's going to happen is they have to finish up all the evaluations for all the properties now in the county. And so it's going to take them some time. We won't know what our new valuations are going to be till sometime between January and March. Once they establish the new valuations, the law requires that they cannot collect any more tax as a total. The total amount of tax they collect in the county cannot be more than it was the previous year. So we won't know, that said, we won't know what our millage is until they know what the entire valuation is on all the properties. And then once they do that, then they can set a percentage based on those total valuations of every property in the county to then figure out what the millage percentage should be in order to charge an equal amount to of total tax money that they did in the prior year. So hopefully that made sense. In addition, though, it's given that this is going to be a big hardship for a lot of landowners. We're of course they say we don't really know how much our taxes are going to go up, and just that we simply kind of do. We know it's going to go up very significantly. I mean, our tax basis, our valuations are going to go up between 3,000 and 5,000%. In other words, with the value they have on our property in which they base our taxes will go up 3,000 to 5,000%. That does not mean our taxes that we pay will go up that much, but it's some percentage of that, and so we're going to see, for those who own property, we're going to see a very significant increase. And so, given that's going to be a hardship for certain people, that kind of thing, maybe a very significant hardship. We might see landowners, farmers might see their tax bill go up maybe several times what it is, maybe a few 100% even of what it is. So, all that said, the Clean and Green program is what they're introducing. They're kind of pushing that, of course, enough that they wanted to hold meetings throughout the county for the Clean and Green. It's a state program. It's nothing new. It's been around for quite some time. However, it's until fairly recent years, it's been something that relatively few farmers and that kind of thing throughout the state would actually really benefit from. Well, now because of the increased taxation, now the Clean and Green program is poised to play a very significant role in who pays how much taxes in the state of Pennsylvania. So the Clean and Green, for those who sign up for the Clean and Green program, they could save or have, I would say, a readjustment of their property values up to about 50%. So they might cut your tax basis in half in terms of the valuation that they place on your property, simply because you accept upon yourself the limitation of keeping your property in a sense under the same use that it currently is. That means if you have woods, it stays woods. If it's agricultural, it stays agricultural, that kind of thing. And so, that said, there are one of three designations under which one might be able to sign up or apply for the Clean and Green program. There's one which is the normal, just agricultural, Clean and Green, which is if you have active agricultural land, whether it's farm fields or whatever, whether you own it, lease it, or if it's even fallow, it's okay, as long as sometime in the not too distant future it has been farmed. Then it applies as agricultural land, and it falls under the Clean and Green exemption. Now, if you have mixed property or a different kind of property, where you also have farmland and woods, or farmland and swamp, or something like that, then there are a couple other categories. One is basically the forest set aside program. Okay, And so what that does is allows you to designate your forest land as such, as forest land and that kind of thing. Of course, with all of these designations, there are some, some might feel minor, some might feel significant, depending on what kind of activities you plan for your land. There are some limitations of what we can do on our land, and there are some probably likely some gray areas, which in order to conduct new operations on our lands, we might have to get the county assessor's permission, or perhaps even the county commissioner's permission to conduct certain new activities on our land. And so in other words, we've got to, in order to get a tax break, we have to accept some form of government controls in terms of our land usage. So then the third category is what's called the ag reserve. Now, the first one is this normal clean and green. The second one is forest reserve. I'm trying to get my terminology correct. But that is if you have forest land or wooded land. And then you have what's called ag reserve, which is, in a sense, maybe your wooded property could be this as well, but maybe some prime swampland or something that is not suited to be called like workable, usable forestry, open forest, or agricultural land. And so that would be considered ag reserve. And so under ag reserve, if your land qualifies for that and you choose that option, then along with that comes the necessity that you must open your land up to public access. Okay? And so in order to get that tax break, you've got to let everybody on. So now there are some qualifications of that, okay, and they're very, very quick and clear to point out those limitations. Okay, if you already have like too many people hunting or something like that, or enough people hunting or whatever, you're okay not to allow people on for hunting. It really isn't clear though whether during the rest of the year you have to let them on or not. And so there are some things, some conditions by which you may be able to not allow access, but the general principle is that you have to allow public access. And so, at least one of the big questions I raised at the meeting, which actually did result in a little bit of perhaps heated debate. I was kind of, I raised my hand at one point for a second time in the meeting, was called upon, made a couple corrections, and then asked some questions, and quickly they said I was a disruptor in the meeting. although my entire line of questioning had 100% to do with clean and green and how it was going to apply to us. I simply maybe think they didn't appreciate how I phrased the questioning, or maybe the spot that it put it in, or whatever, and so they didn't appreciate it. But regardless, I asked the question, and one of the big questions is this: liability. What is landowner liability in all this? If we have, especially for those who have mixed land, if I have, for example, farmland which is adjacent to woodland or swampland or something like that, which is under the ag reserve, or even if there's a wooded area that is a buffer between some swampland and the ag reserve and the clean and green area, the actual agricultural areas, say where we have like crops or fence, like for example, what happens if you have an electric fence with livestock, and there's 8 or 10,000 volts, which is very common, and somebody crosses through the ag reserve area, which is open, open to public, through the wooded area, which they may or may not have, permission to be in, but then still go through to the agricultural area, and grab hold of the fence and have a heart attack or whatever, or for example, like for us, we produce maple syrup. We have tubing that goes through our woods and high tensile wire and that kind of thing. What if somebody goes taking off through the woods and where they're not supposed to be and strings themselves up on that, and damages themselves? Where does liability fall? And in some of the literature, it says that people have to know when they have public access that there's very limited liability, or this and that and the other. And yet, when I got specific about the questioning, then they made it really clear that yes, I have liability there, and I have a new responsibility. Okay, if there are areas where there are public access, and it's my property, it wouldn't matter if necessarily if a person had wandered or what have you. I have the responsibility to make sure that there's a physical barrier that prevents anyone from actually walking into, say, my high tensile fence, or walking into an area where I have tubing or some other thing in the woods which might pose a hazard. Might be some operation or function that I'm doing in the woods, which somebody would hurt themselves on. And basically, if they can prove, which is exactly what will happen in court, is they'll try to prove that there was some sort of negligence or intentional neglect or whatever in terms of providing for the safety of the public. So essentially, yeah, there's new liability. So along with higher taxes, then may also come higher insurance premiums on your land. And so if there's any kind of public access allowable or something like that, your insurance companies are probably going to like this immensely. So that's another issue. But then there's a third issue for me that really doesn't have to do with the limitations, because we're going to have to basically, they're not saying what the limitations are going to be. They want to act like there are really very little or hardly any limitations to the clean and green, except that nothing ever comes from the government without a hook. And so it stays clearly that there are limitations, and there are going to be things that if we want to do on our property, now we're going to have to ask permission of the powers that be to actually, conduct certain, maybe perhaps certain kind of activities on our land. And so essentially, we won't even know until we're already signed up for this. You know what I'm saying? And so essentially, that's kind of a big question mark. But the other really big problem is this. And I'm speaking as a farmer, and I think every landowner should even if you're not a farmer, should ask this question as well, because we're in a time when everybody that owns land is now a colonizer of some sort. Everybody that owns land now has come about it somehow illegitimately. At least that's the political perspective. So what happens now when the majority of the residents in our county who just live on their little town lot in their house, their apartment, or not apartment, they wouldn't pay the tax. Well, they only pay the taxes indirectly, but if on an acre or two or something like that of land, what happens to them when they find out that when those who sign up for the Clean and Green now might pay up to 50% less than their actual valuation. Their valuation might be dropped by 50%, and so pay 50% less in their taxes. And then that total money, because the county has to still bring in the same total amount of money, in revenue. So what's going to happen when everyone discovers and really realizes that suddenly their taxes are higher, so that landowners, colonizers, or whatever, but landowners, whether it be farmers or simply people that own a sizable chunk of land, 10 acres or more, are getting a reduced tax burden, and yet because they're getting a reduced tax burden, then the rest of everyone else has to make up for the difference. So they're actually going to pay more taxes, so that, if you're a fellow landowner, so that you and I can pay less. And so that is, that's going to be a sore in the relationship between the agricultural community and landowners and people that are not, in a sense, landholders, in the sense of having 10 acres or more of land. And so now we're creating now a political rift between landholders and non-landholders, basically. So how would you feel? I know how I would feel if I didn't own a bunch of land, just my house, my little postage stamp, or maybe my house and 5 acres, a little homesteader or something like that. Trying to, just have a job, trying to have a couple animals and a little garden, to realize then that I pay more taxes on my little homestead because those who have a lot more land than I have are in this program in which they pay less. And so the county has to make up the reduction in my tax burden by increasing their tax burden. So that's fairly disconcerting. We already have a cultural shift happening in which people are the general public is becoming more and more indifferent to farmers, and we already have a situation in which food security, in terms of the local nature of food and that kind of thing, is quickly being displaced by more and more and more consolidation, and our food being sourced more and more remotely from where we actually live. And so essentially, because of that, they're able to, and there's some advantages that those large producers have, many of which are either direct or indirect government payouts. Others are, perhaps labor advantages, perhaps regulation advantages, and that type of thing, to actually be able to produce at scale beyond with what local agriculture can compete at. And that's most certainly true with the meat industry, has become true with the dairy industry, that because of government programs, small and local farmers are being run out of business. We're dropping like flies right now, and the current climate, is playing out to actually, magnify that problem and drive even more of us out. So what's going to happen to your food supply? What's going to happen when the majority of the rest of your food, just like meat, is now, when the majority of it actually comes from outside of our country? or comes very remotely from California, New Mexico, from large vegetable tracts far away. We saw in COVID how the transportation broke down, how the food supply began to break down, all of that, and that wasn't even, in a sense, as nearly as serious a problem as it could have been. And so now, with further, put it this way: up until now, it's basically been an issue of consumer indifference. In other words, people have become indifferent to their local farmers simply because they can buy cheaper stuff at the store, and they're not so concerned about where it comes from. They're gonna buy what's cheapest and what they can afford, reasonable thing to do, and yet a short-sighted thing to do because of the obvious implications. But now, what this stands to very potentially do is actually create not just indifference but animosity. And actually a hostile type of relationship between farmers and landowners and their neighbors, who perhaps don't have as much land and that kind of thing. Why should they feel as though it's adequate for them to pay a higher tax burden just so because we're in on this government program, and so it's just a government payout. It's government in a sense. It's another sort of government welfare for landowners. And so, myself as a landowner, I've never collected welfare. I've never collected a subsidy check. I've never gotten a break. The government has never paid a nickel out for any crop insurance that I have made a claim on or anything like that, because I just don't do that. But many do, and many will continue to do that, and so that rift will continue to grow between landowners and, for lack of a better term, non-landowners. So the question is, are you comfortable with that? I mean, is it really enough of a benefit and a perk to tell people with less than 10 acres that, well, guess what? You get to pay more taxes so that your landholding neighbors don't have to. But we're going to throw in a little cookie for you and let you give you access to some of their land, and so make it public. Do you think that's really going to be a big incentive for people? That's going to really appease everyone? No, but it's going to. But what it probably will do is give a lot of non-landowners a sense of entitlement for access to their property, and once they feel that sense of entitlement for a little bit of your property, maybe what's under the ag reserve, they might feel a little more entitled to be able to walk around on the rest of it as well, access it, open your gates, what I'm saying, cut a little firewood, whatever, but essentially the principle of ownership now is beginning to lose its parameters and its meaning. What does it mean to have ownership? What does it mean to have ownership rights? And so the liability and responsibility of those who have land are now going to be magnified in such a way that, for example, those who still are, love to go and get a side of beef or a whole cow or whatever, some freezer beef from their farming neighbor, okay, and you're paying, say, $3.50 or $4 or something like that, $4.50 on your hanging weight, and so your farmer's selling it like $3.50, $4, which is cheap enough. I mean, you get hanging weight on an animal, your custom slaughterer somewhere across the country processes for you, and you fill your freezer for pretty reasonable amount of money. Well, what happens now if, okay, that guy that's raising cattle, now his taxes are 3-4 times as much. And if you weren't on Clean and Green, his taxes might be 8 or 10 times as much. And so, but he's still going to be paying 3 or 4 times as much. And not only that, but he has to allow the public onto certain parts of his land. And so now his liability insurance has just gone through the roof because his farm is basically now public access. And so there's new liability. So now two of his principal highest expenses, his land taxes and his insurance, his liability insurance, have just gone up astronomically. Do you think you're still going to be able to go and buy that cheap side of beef? Are you going to be able to rely on them? No. In order for them to now be able to just pay for the privilege of owning land in which to farm and which to raise those cattle, they are now going to have to raise their prices, even selling freezer beef to their local neighbors, which is going to actually then further exacerbate the relationship, the diminishment of the relationship between local farmers and landowners and non-landowners of 10 acres or more. And so now we've just, we're actually creating a scenario which is cutting into local farmers markets. And now we might be facing a situation where the locals might buy less. And it all depends really on what's the price of meat going to do. You can guarantee with the influx of new meat supplies from outside of our country that those economies from which that beef is coming is producing it for less, because they are not a developed society and a developed culture like we are. And so essentially they're going to be bringing in they're going to flood our market with cheap beef and make it even harder for the small farm, for the small landowner. And so the question is, if this is what's going to be done to the larger landholders, okay, how long is it going to be until something like this happens to the small ones? What's going to happen? Are you always going to be able to access water or have those few cattle or something like that on your little homestead? If they're going to take it away from the big guys, you're next in line. You're the next one. So anyway, just some thoughts. Always looking forward to feedback and that kind of thing. Definitely wanting to ignite some conversation about that. Of course, once again, I want to stress that we need to have good civil discourse with our county officials. Some of this is a lot of this isn't their choice and that kind of thing. However, one of the other things that is a privilege that they receive is some additional controls over what takes place in our county. I mean, we already have very significant building codes and enforcements and new zoning rules all the time, new limitations on what everybody can do. Now, like, anytime anybody builds anything more than 120 square feet, it doesn't matter if it's 3 sides, a little calf hut or shelter for our sheep or whatever, or puts a little shipping container for storage on, or something like anything like that. Now there's new taxation for all of that, and so they're taxing every little thing, controlling more and more and more, to the point where township officials are they're becoming surprised. I know I surprised some of my officials. Nothing against my officials, very nice people, but I surprised them when they thought that I was overstepping myself as a farmer, and I had to inform them that I'm covered by some very specific laws on what I can do as a farmer conducting normal agriculture, because there's so many controls now and so many openings for control that the assumption has become that they can control everything. And so essentially, once again, I'm not saying that that's what our local officials want to do. I'm not saying that they're control freaks or whatever. However, when things mean more tax revenue and that type of thing, well, there's a point where our local officials, our county officials, become incentivized, really not to be representatives of us, but to be representatives of big government to us. And so it's no longer a two-way relationship. They're just bringing it down to us and governing over us. And so essentially, once again, I don't envy that position. I don't envy being in that position, and that type of thing. But at the same time, it's hard to believe that in fairly short time, we'll have our officials saying, "I don't like this any better than you do," yet I'm going to still tell you what you can and can't do on your land. And so, it is what it is. So anyway, thanks for listening, and hopefully, this will engage a little bit of conversation going on in our county, that kind of thing. Hopefully I haven't made anybody angry. I certainly don't mean to. I know I made one of our county leaders fairly upset with me the other day at the meeting and that kind of thing. Once again, I didn't mean to do that, but once again, it's not me bringing down anything on them. It's them bringing it down on us. So I'm not sure why he thought he had a right to be angry or upset with me. However, as a commissioner, that was the word I was looking for. As a commissioner, my suggestion would be to get out a little bit more and listen to the people that you're supposed to be representing, because people are very much not happy about this, and they're not happy with their former commissioners for establishing this, for initiating this reevaluation. However, personally, I don't blame them for that. I think it was wise, because the state was going to the courts were bringing it down anyway, and so they definitely wanted to do that under their own terms rather than to do it under the terms that some court would lay down. And so I don't blame them for that, and I don't hold any ill will toward them for that. However, what I do have take exception to is that, man, what happened to the day when our public officials were representing us? They're really not representing us anymore to the government. They're representing the government to us. And so there was always, politicians and local officials always have had to play this two-way tug of war. But where's the fight? Where's the pushback? Where is it? I'd like to know a little bit more about where, how they're really trying to really promote our purpose and our cause, because I don't see this clean and green as being really a very positive thing. Someday here, maybe in the near future, I will make another post about what has happened, say, since about 1975, 1976 here, and what's happened to our farmers and exactly why. and the exact government programs which have eliminated small agriculture in our county overall, or most of small agriculture. We're now down to a small fraction, and now there's more and more consolidation of that going on and that kind of thing, even right here within our own county, and as there are plenty of farmers that are loving the consolidation because they're benefiting from it, who are just buying up land because on the other end they're getting those checks, you know, and so and so even though they deny getting them, no, they're getting them, and so and so and so in a sense, we're seeing the not actually the end of an era. The end of the era of small agriculture in America began, like say 50 years ago. But now we're kind of seeing some of the final nails in the coffin, so to speak. And so we're going to see less and less and less, and more of these farmlands and the cattle that you see, the crops that you see, that kind of thing, giving way to housing developments, to big commodity operations, that kind of thing, solar maybe. So anyway, I'll stop talking here at this point and just leave the rest up to you for your own consideration and your own thoughts. Thanks for listening. Sorry it was so long, but I think I was able to keep it fairly substantive in terms of and informative, hopefully. So please give me some feedback if you felt this was informative. If you feel like this is a worthwhile conversation, whether it was good or stupid or bad and smart, let me know. I'd love to hear back from you. So thanks.